Thank you so much, Mr. Qureshi, and my panelist colleagues has a great insight. I got a lot of things to learn, and I really appreciate your publications. Really very good. I would go through so to enlighten myself about Kashmir. One disclaimer: I represent Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty here, and I work there. So the views, analysis, information, facts, whatever I present here, that's my own, that's my personal, and that doesn't represent in any way the views of my organization, that is Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. I will present what Mira mentioned, like my journalistic background, and right now whatever I'm working, I'm reporting, or whatever I did and whatever I saw, I observed and I reported on. But before going there, I have some very strong observations about Kashmir. I think Kashmiris are the victims of two prefixes. And those, I always name the two prefixes as the imposed prefixes by the two powerful states of India and Pakistan. One prefix is that of the Azad, and the second prefix is that of the independent, like Pakistan and India. They are calling it Azad, the Indian state, then the Pakistani Kashmir is occupied for them. And Pakistan has the Indian side is occupied for them and their own side is Azad. So, and then there are some other suffixes and prefixes like the Atut Ang, for example, inseparable part, and the Shehrak, for example, the jugular vein. And then sometimes I wonder, it's a territory that they are referring to. But what about the inhabitants? Are they so much in love with the inhabitants of Kashmir? That's a big question for me. And when I go through all from 1948 till now, what is happening in Kashmir, and I'm hearing from my Kashmiri colleagues from either side, because I work with both of them together. I think they are the victims of these prefixes and suffixes. And when I connect the roots, I believe the roots also lie in these two prefixes and suffixes. Claiming Kashmir, claiming the territory, but if you look at the inhabitants, they are the ultimate victims of whatever is happening there. My panelist colleague, Pulzeen, mentioned Major General Akbar Khan. You may have heard 3-4 times from him. That was the person who organized the tribal lashkars from my area, from where I belong. The tribal lashkars in 1947-48 went there and they ransacked and they, whatever is Pakistan called, liberated the present area that is under the Pakistani control. I would connect some points in the last part of my discussion here, that what is happening, the policy of Major General Akbar Khan from 1947 to 48, it is still there, but the shape and structure is changed a little bit. From organizing tribal lashkars, now it's proxies, and proxies not from the tribal areas, rather proxies from Punjab province. Because all the Kashmiri organizations that you are seeing, and like in the late 80s and till the 1999, 9/11, that was the turning point, globally and particularly in the region. The shape was changed to jihadi organization, jihadist organizations. And there is also one observation from me. Pakistan may be claiming the territory or maybe claiming the Kashmiris. But the bigger tragedy, like more than a victim for Kashmiris, I think, is that which was and which could be a purely nationalistic struggle for their right of self-determination with the jihadi organization. It was converted into a jihadist or Islamist struggle. I think that narrative was acceptable to the world, maybe in one shape or another shape, till the 9/11. But after the 9/11, I think putting the stigma of jihadism on Kashmiris or naming their struggle as a jihadi struggle, I think that is not doing any service. Whoever is doing Pakistan or anyone, that is not doing any service to the people of Kashmir or the Kashmiris or whatever their struggle is. As I mentioned, the roots of terrorism and radicalization goes back to that policy of proxies and jihadist lashkars and azad and occupied. And for that reason, Pakistan supported the Kashmiris in the name of jihad. If I go back to my own experience, when there was a time of like the mid-90s, there used to be organizations such as Hizbul Mujahideen, Harkatul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and Al-Badr Mujahideen, like different quote-unquote, when I say Mujahideen, so quote-unquote. And those were led by people like Salahuddin, that was the only person who was a Kashmiri and who was from Kashmir. The other groups like Harkatul Mujahideen, for example, that had a connection with the Harkatul Jihadi Islami of Afghanistan, Jalaluddin Haqqani, who was fighting the anti-Soviet war and who later became the chief of the notorious Haqqani network, and whose son is now the interior minister, Jalaluddin Haqqani, Sirajuddin Haqqani. Jalaluddin is no more, but Sirajuddin Haqqani is sitting in Afghanistan as the interior minister of Taliban, and he was leading the Haqqani terrorist network. So the roots of Harkatul Mujahideen was leading to the Harkatul Jihadi Islami of Afghanistan, and those people fought side by side there in Afghanistan. And that group was led by Fazlur Rahman Khalil, who was from Northwest. He was not a Kashmiri. Hizbul, as I mentioned, that was the only person, Salahuddin. Then there was another, Al-Badr Mujahid. That group was led by another Northwestern person, Bakhzamin. Then there was Lashkar-e-Taiba, and that group was led by Hafiz Saeed. Lashkar-e-Taiba was later on converted into Jamaat Dawa, and they were running their charity organization in the name of Falah-e-Insaniyat, going into the flood areas, delivering aids and everything, whatever. Then a new group was also formed, and that was the most lethal group along with Lashkar-e-Taiba. Post 1998, when the Indian plane was hijacked to Kandahar under the first Taliban rule, and the passengers were released in exchange for the release of some Kashmiri fighters, and one among them was Maulana Masood Azhar. And again, like Hafiz Saeed, who was from central Punjab, Sargodha province, Masood Azhar belongs to southern Punjab. He is from Bahawalpur. Mera mentioned the Mumbai attacks, for example, where the roots led to Pakistan. And that was a joint attack by Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. And the man who was arrested later on, Ajmal Amir Kasab, and who was investigated, and later on he was hanged. He was punished and he was hanged. He was from Bukhara district of Punjab province. So all these groups, those are Pakistan based, and I still remember that in the 1998, 90s or before that, we used to see them in their SUVs with their guards, with their guns, with their display of arms, like they used to have the liberty of roaming around in the streets of Islamabad and anywhere in the world, anywhere in Pakistan. They were delivering speeches and conferences. Even I have seen them arranging iftar dinners for journalists in Islamabad, Marriott, and holiday in hotels. So they have so much liberty in that time. I also have seen those organizations, and particularly the political wing, Jamaat Islami, that was supported by the Jamaat Islami group. They were organizing camps in colleges and universities and distributing the literature. And the literature was containing the young men who are going to fight in Kashmir in military uniform, with in very heroic postures, holding the guns. Some were dead. And then there used to be funeral prayers in the villages. The ones who used to die in Indian Kashmir, and there used to be funeral prayers, and even political leaders would go there, and their death would be celebrated in those villages. I'm just taking you to the background there. What was happening in the 90s and late 80s. There was a very, and just to relax you a little bit, there was a very interesting character, and that is also from my student life. Not from my student, that is just my beginning in journalism. There was an interesting character, Major Masgul, if you remember him. And he used to be sitting on a truck, holding an AK, and in a public procession, with a long hair and a round cape around his head and skull cap, and AK-47, and the truck would, there would be chanting slogans from the truck, side by side with Jamaat-e-Islami leader Qazi Hussain Ahmad at that time. And they would say, Kashmir banega Pakistan. Kashmir will become Pakistan. What was that? That was just a kind of recruitment policy. That was just a kind of indoctrination policy. And the indoctrination was mainly coming from Punjab province, mainly coming from northwestern Pakistan, which is my region, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, in the tribal areas. I would also connect that the Major General Akbar Khan policy of arranging tribal lashkars from the tribal areas, or you may put a question later on, remind me, that this is no more working there. This is no more working, that chapter is closed. Why? You can ask her, I can explain it later. Then came the 9/11, and things were changed a little bit. There was the global war on terror, pressure came on Pakistan. They have to wrap up the support for the Taliban, not forever, but just for the time being. And later on, Pakistan was accused of double game by the international, particularly the United States, in terms of their support for the Taliban. Many Kashmiri organizations, groups who were fighting there, they were asked to shut up. A shut-up call was sent, and they went underground, but still there was no action. They were just sent underground. But then after that came the Mumbai attacks, the train station attacks, Taj Mahal attack, the Indian Parliament attack, the Lal Kala attacks. And I think those, if I also mention on the issue of Kashmir, I think Pakistan and India, almost all the wars, those were fought between India and Pakistan was because of Kashmir, or for one or another reason. 1948, 1965, 1971, and then the Kargil 1999. And then apart from that, there used to be like the regular skirmishes on the border. And I forgot to mention the question of terrorism. I just had written something that we are calling terrorism just like exploding bombs and targeting people and kidnapping people. That was my note, that's my personal note. But what about that terrorism? When you are terrorizing the villagers on the borders of India and Kashmir every day. It's not happening right now, but just go back like from 1 year from now, and you will find that India is shelling the villages on the Pakistani side, and Pakistan is shelling the villages on the Indian side. So the children, the women, the older, the elderly people, their farming, their cattle, their everything is disturbed. Isn't it that terrorism? That's a flagrant kind of terrorism by these two countries. We are only seeing the exploding of bombs. So this is why I'm saying that Kashmiris are the victims of this Atut Ang and what's called Jagular Wan or Azad and occupied. make the connections with Afghanistan, because after the 9/11, those groups were asked to shut up. And instead of staying there, many of those groups migrated to the tribal areas. Even before that, the Kashmiris have a connection, like the people, not the Kashmiris, the people who were fighting in Kashmir, most of those were Punjabis and from Pashtun land. They had a connection with the Afghan Jihad because they had their training facilities there. If we go back to the 1998 cruise missile attacks on Afghanistan by the Clinton administration in response to the attacks in embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. So the Jaish-e-Mohammed and his and Lashkar-e-Taiba people were reported dead in those camps. So those connections are pretty long there, it makes them. After that time, those Kashmiri fighters shifted to the tribal areas. And in the tribal areas, at that time, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, was also emerging. That was an umbrella group of Pakistani Taliban from different areas, and they made the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. And they were fighting, initially they were fighting alongside the Afghan Taliban against the ISAF and NATO forces in Afghanistan. At that time, people like Ilyas Kashmiri, who was a notorious militant, he came there, and just like the other Taliban and Al-Qaeda and Afghan Taliban and Pakistani Taliban leaders, Ilyas Kashmiri was also killed in a drone strikes in the Pakistani tribal areas. Another prominent character from those fighters was Asmatullah Muawiyah, and he was considered to be the leader of the Punjabi Taliban in that area. When the government, after Pervez Musharraf, announced amnesty for the militants for a very limited number of times, so Asmatullah Muawiyah used to say that we will conquer Delhi, along with the support of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban. But when the project Mujahideen, I would say Project Mujahideen in Kashmir, that was stopped under pressure from the international community, particularly the United States. So they asked the Punjabi Taliban to come back, because there are two terminologies, I don't know if you follow that or not, but sarcastically it is said that good Taliban, quote unquote, good Taliban are those who were fighting inside Afghanistan, are focused on Kashmir, but who are not fighting against the Pakistani state. And there were the quote unquote bad Taliban. The bad Taliban were those who were fighting with the Afghan Taliban in Pakistan, but they were also implementing their agenda in Pakistan. And they were attacking the Pakistani security forces. So sarcastically, people are calling them the good Taliban and the bad Taliban. So those Punjabi Taliban of Asmatullah Muawiyah who went there, they were the good Taliban, means the Kashmir focused. And when amnesty was announced, so they returned, and he is still in Punjab. Then when the pressure was increased on Pakistan, so the nukes were tightened. That was tightened against him, and then FATF, Financial Action Task Force, conditions came on Pakistan. Pakistan was put in the grey list. And I think Pakistan's own situation was also not that good to continue their support, because after the attacks by those groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, that brought, because in 1998 India and Pakistan became the declared nuclear powers. So the two nuclear powers were brought face to face more than once. And if you followed the incidents of 2019, Pathankot and Pulwama incidents, so there was a kind of limited scale war, air war. India attacked the Balakot areas in Pakistan, and then Pakistan replied, and Indian airplane was dropped, Indian jet was dropped on the Pakistani area, and the Indian pilot was captured by the Pakistani side, who was later handed over to India on the Wagah border with a lot of propaganda. So At that time, those projects were stopped. If I take you to the situation, what is happening right now. So right now, there is no active militancy or fighting or very much active and flagrant support from the Pakistani side. And the reasons are many. The first is, there is the international pressure. Not only that, European Union or the United States is not going to allow this, but even Pakistan's very much friendly countries, such as the UAE and Saudis, they are also not in favor of that project. So for the time being, that project is closed. And Hafiz Saeed, who was the chief of Lashkar-e-Taiba, and later on it was renamed as Jamaat-ud-Dawa. He is in prison, but prison means not a regular jail, that he is somewhere in a regular jail. He is believed to be somewhere in a safe house. And if you remember, there was a blast in Pakistan, Lahore city in June 2022. And it was believed that that blast was meant to target Hafiz Saeed, who was somewhere in a house. And now he is shifted there. Masood Azhar, who was another head of a most lethal organization, Jaish-e-Mohammed, he mysteriously escaped from custody right now. And only last month, Pakistan announced that he is hiding somewhere in Afghanistan. But the Afghan Taliban issued a statement, and they said that no, he is not here. So I spoke to a few people before coming here, and they told me that he is somewhere in hiding inside Pakistan. They are still assets, but I think the project is suspended for a while, and obviously for reasons very clear, because the international community, it's not going to buy, it's not going to allow this project anymore, and Pakistan is under serious pressure. Pakistan has its own problems, that is political, that is security. Political problems, you are seeing Imran Khan is on the roads. There is instability over the past, I think, more than 1 year in Pakistan, and that is affecting the economy. It's a little bit, it's rolling down right now, but it's not working anymore. And the security problem is that Pakistan has two borders, eastern border and western border. On the eastern border, there is situation with India, which is for a moment calm right now. But on the western border, there is Afghan Taliban, who was once considered as the allies of Pakistan, but I think situation between Pakistan and the Taliban is not going very well, and Pakistan is really concerned about the Taliban, particularly about the presence of the Pakistani Taliban, means the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, who are now carrying out everyday attacks in the cities, targeting the military, targeting the police. If you follow the situation, it's not going very well in northwestern Pakistan. So for the moment, that project is suspended for a while. And I mentioned the reason. You may have your questions later. What next? I think in the what next part, this is, I will join Mira. And I don't have any optimistic views to tell you about the what next. And that is on the basis of my observation and my reporting. I would say that although the groups such as Harkat, such as Hizbul, such as Al-Badr, they are no more there. They are no more in the, like, they are no more the darling of the Pakistani intelligence agencies, I would say, because Fazlur Rahman Khalil and Bakhzamin are people like Jaish people. They are just like laying silent. But Hafiz Saeed is still there, and his group is still there. Jaish people, Jaish-e-Mohammed people, they mostly migrated to the northwestern side, and again, if you followed the 2009 situation in Swat region, that is, you are calling Kashmir the Switzerland of India or Switzerland of Asia, but in our part we are calling Swat, that's the district, the Switzerland of Pakistan. So there was a kind of insurgency and militancy, and the Pakistani Taliban under the leader of Mullah Fazlullah, who was also known as Mullah FM. He was running an FM radio channel, and he was known as Mullah FM. Under the leadership of Mullah Fazlullah, he captured the whole district of Swat and imposed a kind of Sharia system there. So most of the fighters, I mean the leaders who were there fighting with him, they were Kashmir based. For example, one was Binyamin. He was very popular and very notorious for a kind of violence. Those Jaish groups, Lashkar people who were the die-hard fighters or the die-hard leaders, they now have, because who are ideologically brainwashed, some of those who are just joining them for the support of Kashmiris or some people under the propaganda, they return to their normal life somehow. But the ones who are the die-hard radicals and who are the totally brainwashed, there is no point of return for them unless there is a kind of rehabilitation program. And in Pakistan, there is no rehabilitation program for them. So a person who was fighting with gun has a power when you are having a gun in that region. So it's not going to be returning and selling like opening a vendor shop somewhere and he will be selling things. He is a totally brainwashed person. For him, some people are like, everything is lies in jihad. If it is in this world, he is earning. If it is in the world after this, he is again have a lot of rewards. So they are not returning. So they joined, there are evidence, they joined the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, they joined not the Afghani Taliban really, but the Daesh people. And then again the Lashkari Jangvi people, which was a sectarian organization, and that is also focused on somewhere in Pakistan and also in Kashmir. They also joined the sectarian groups because Daesh and Lashkari Jangvi, they have the same ideologies like the anti-Shiaism. So that's also there. And Daesh is now creating some problems for the Afghan Taliban, just like the Afghan Taliban have the, because I'm always saying that a terrorist organization has the capacity of exploding bombs and targeting people, like such an organization has the capacity of carrying out terrorist attacks. But they don't have the capacity of countering terrorist attacks. The countering terrorist attack is something difficult. So the Afghan Taliban were very successful in carrying out attacks, exploding IEDs and targeting people. But now when they become the ruler of Afghanistan, there is Daesh. And they cannot stop Daesh from carrying out attacks because they don't have the capacity. They were trained totally in carrying out attacks, but they are not trained in countering attacks. So there comes the problem. Daesh is re-emerging in some areas, particularly when Pakistan is holding talks with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So the Taliban who would not agree to surrender to Pakistan, they would ultimately join the Daesh groups. Similarly, when the Afghan Taliban are imposing, when the Afghan Taliban are introducing some sort of reforms in their structure and in their policies, for example, opening schools for girls. So there are many die-hard Taliban and there are many very deep conservatives who are not going to accept that policy. And where they are not accepting the policy, they will ultimately switch to Daesh. That is the very simple, in very simple and in limited time I can present this thing. You may have your question for that. So this is why I'm saying that I don't have too much thing to tell you something about optimistic, but I think those groups are there. Afghan Talibans are there and the Kashmiri fighters are staying there, and at one time, if right now Pakistan is under pressure, but if something goes wrong between India and Pakistan, and I think a lot of changes are coming in the region. You will see it after a year or 2 years, but a lot of changes are coming. There is a project. There is the Baloch insurgency happening in Balochistan province. There is the mix-up of various kinds of militant groups. Even Jaish-ul-Adl kind of groups from in the Iranian border, they are carrying out their activities in that region. Then there are the smuggling routes, and the smuggling groups are promoting, because right now a lot of smuggling, human smuggling and drug smuggling is coming from Afghanistan through Balochistan, that is entering Iran, and from Iran it's going to Turkey and then to Europe. On the other side, it's going to Central Asia, those groups under the Taliban. It's going to Central Asia, from Central Asia it's going to coming that way to Europe. So, and then on the Central Asia, there is the Ansarullah group on that side. So they have they have links, they are surviving, they are alive, but they are, I think, underground for the moment, because there is no green signal from Pakistan. What could be the plan for Pakistan? I think the game in Kashmir is not over for Pakistan. The game in Kashmir is not over for Pakistan. I think now Pakistan's focus is going to be, after pressure from the international community about supporting a kind of militant organizations or terrorist organizations, Pakistan possible policy could be, and as I heard from people, to organize some sort of nationalist struggle from inside Kashmir with a blend of violence. And for that reason, I think to manage a kind of supply lines, because such organizations always need two things. One is external support, moral support is one thing, but apart from that, they always need finances, and because without a steady stream of finances, a militant organization is not going to survive. And without a steady stream of arms and ammunition, no militant organization will survive. Look at the situation in Sri Lanka, what's happening to them when everything was stopped. Although it was Sri Lankan Tamil Tigers who first introduced the suicide attacks. It was not the suicide attacks in the Islamic world. It was there who introduced him, and that was the most lethal organization. So to provide some sort of support for such kind of indigenous political struggle and a kind of patriotic links and a kind of nationalistic links inside the Kashmiri youths. And I think there are two groups I have seen the names of. One is Resistance Force right now, and another one is a little known, some sort of Kashmir Tigers, in the name of Kashmir Tigers. I heard these two groups are there right now. So from inside there will be an effort, and I think for the supply of arms, not to find any links to the Pakistanis, I think there could be some options with the drug smugglers. And I am also hearing some things about smuggling through drones in that long area. They can do something with that. To conclude, I would say that the dragon is sick, it's sleepy, it's frail, it's fragile, but I think it is far from dead. It can awake one time, sometime maybe, but depending on the situation, political situation and security situation in the region. I believe to conclude, I believe political situation right now in Pakistan, it's one thing, it goes and come, it will happen something. The maximum that happens is the taken over by the military, but that is something routine in Pakistan. That is something not something new in Pakistan. But the security situation, I think that's not very good. If something happens in Afghanistan, that is a kind of, that will be a kind of explosion. Because Afghan Taliban is also not a single group. There are many groups inside them. There are rifts. And if tomorrow something happens, and if you study the history of Afghanistan, always when something happens there, it happens all of a sudden, and it takes over everything within minutes. So if something happens, then there is Tehreek Taliban, there is Daesh, there are other groups. So this thing once again goes in the wrong direction. That's all.